Waldenstrom Macroglobulinemia is a cancer of plasma cells that leads to an overproduction of antibodies like immunoglobulin M. In this video, we'll give you an easy way to remember everything you need to know about Waldenstrom Macroglobulinemia. New York, the home of taxicabs, skyscrapers, and the iconic Wall Street. By the way, Wall Street should help you remember Waldenstrom Macroglobulinemia, since Wall Street sounds like Waldenstrom, doesn't it? Waldenstrom Macroglobulinemia is a cancer of plasma cells in the body. Next, shift your gaze to those plasma balls the street vendor is selling. These light-up plastic toys are a big hit among tourists here at Wall Street. That's why this vendor has so many of them. All these plasma balls should remind you of a plasma cell tumor. You know, since a plasma cell tumor is just an overaccumulation of plasma cells, right? Waldenstrom Macroglobulinemia is a tumor of plasma cells, the kind of B cells that produce antibodies. Let's keep going to find out why we call this disease a macroglobulinemia. Since this is one of the busiest streets in New York, it makes sense that street vendors are always competing for attention from tourists. This vendor even has a giant M's candy dispenser with its arms spread in a Y shape, kind of like an antibody. This Y, or antibody-shaped M's dispenser, is our recurring symbol for immunoglobulin M, since immunoglobulin is just a fancy term for antibody. What's more, this street vendor is refilling the dispenser, but he must have zoned out for a bit because he's overfilled the dispenser. The overflowing M's here should remind you that we're talking about an overproduction of IgM in the body. Immunoglobulin M, or IgM for short, is the type of antibody overproduced by the cancerous plasma cells in Waldenstrom Macroglobulinemia. Recall from immunology that IgM is usually found as a pentamer, that is, as 5 antibodies joined at the middle. The 5 antibody complex is quite large, which is why it is referred to as a macroglobulin, since macro just means large in Greek, and immunoglobulins are a type of globulin. The overly high levels of IgM in blood can therefore also be referred to as macroglobulinemia. Next, look across the street where a street performer seems to be stuck in some super sticky tar for the side of the road under construction. See how he's literally wading through the viscous mix? This extreme viscosity, or hyperviscosity if you will, should help you remember hyperviscosity syndrome. Hyperviscosity syndrome refers to increased viscosity of the blood that causes problems in Waldenstrom Macroglobulinemia. This is caused by the increased amount of IgM in blood, which thickens the blood, turning it into a sludge that doesn't move well through vessels. In fact, the blood gets so thick and sticky that it can actually completely block flow. Let's talk about what potential symptoms might arise from this finding. Take a look at the concrete tube they were using to pour this wet tar. You can see the tar has dried up and clogged the tube near the opening. This clogged tube should help you remember thrombosis, because thrombosis refers to clogged blood vessels, and blood vessels are like tubes for your blood. The hyperviscosity of the blood we just talked about can create clots that block flow, leading to a variety of symptoms depending on where the blood vessels are affected. Thrombosis of the vessels of the brain can lead to headache and stroke, while blockages in vessels of the eye lead to blurry vision and retinal hemorrhage. When the viscous blood blocks flow to the fingers and toes, it can lead to Raynaud phenomenon, in which the fingers and toes turn blue from lack of oxygen. Back to the story. You see, this street performer usually sets up on the other side of the road, but the candy vendor beat him to the spot this morning. The performer's so annoyed that he even threw his drink bottle at the vendor. This empty bottle of red drink should help you remember anemia. You know, since anemia refers to low levels of red blood cells, just like this bottle lacks red liquid. Waldenstrom Macroglobulinemia can also cause anemia in patients. If you recall from our immunology videos, you'd know that plasma cells typically live in the bone marrow. A cancer of plasma cells can therefore crowd out all the space in the bone marrow. This prevents all the other cells there from normally producing blood cells, leading to anemia. Other findings include thrombocytopenia or leukopenia, although this is less common. Yikes! The performer might have been aiming for the vendor, but he's shattered one of the vendor's plasma balls in the process. See those frayed electrical wires poking out of the damaged toy? These frayed wires should help you remember peripheral neuropathy, because nerves carry electrical impulses, kind of like wires, and these wires are broken, representing damaged nerves, right? The mechanism around why this happens is still unclear, but it's thought that high levels of IgM can damage nerves, either by blocking their blood supply or by directly attacking the nerves as antibodies. Whatever the cause, this manifests as numbness, pain, or tingling in the extremities. Before I move on, I should mention that bone lesions or hypercalcemia are not typically seen in patients with Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia. This is helpful for distinguishing this disease from multiple myeloma, which is another type of plasma cell cancer that does cause bone lesions. This vendor hasn't even noticed what's going on. He's too distracted by the stock ticker graph. Since this is Wall Street, even the vendors here invest in stocks. That big spike on the graph must have been what caught his attention. This spike should help you remember another type of spike, the M spike. You see, an M spike is detected in serum protein electrophoresis, or SPEP, in patients with Waldenstrom Macroglobulinemia. It is not my place to teach you the nitty-gritty of laboratory medicine, but I'll briefly explain what this means. The M in M-spike stands for monoclonal, which literally translates to one clone. This refers to one population of proteins that looks exactly the same, as if they were all clones of each other. Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia is a cancer, and you should know that cancer usually arises from replicating one progenitor cell. This leads to a bunch of plasma cells that are identical clones of one another. When these plasma cells make antibodies, they end up making the exact same antibody, a monoclonal population of IgM. Make sense? In normal people, there is no M spike. Nearly every antibody looks different from one another, since we want diverse antibodies to protect against a wide range of potential threats. So finding a single spike of one unique antibody, or an M spike, is highly unusual. This is usually the sign of a plasma cell cancer. Note that M spike here has nothing to do with the type of antibody produced. The M does not stand for IgM, but rather for monoclonal. It just so happens that in Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia, we have a M spike of IgM antibodies. Next, shift your attention to this street performer's banjo. It's more lightweight than a guitar, which is handy for carrying around the streets of New York. His banjo should help you remember Bence-Jones protein. Get it? It's the Bence-Jones banjo. Bence-Jones protein refers to light chain fragments of antibodies that accumulate in the urine. These are detected through a 24-hour urine collection and subsequent urine protein electrophoresis, or UPEP test. It's worth noting that a rapid urine dipstick test for protein will show up as negative, since the urine dipstick only detects albumin and not the antibody fragments that make up Bence-Jones protein. Going back to our plasma cells, we should talk about another measurable sign of plasma cell overgrowth. If you take a biopsy of the bone marrow in patients with Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia, you can actually observe the cancerous plasma cells crowding out the bone marrow. In fact, a finding of more than 10% plasma cells in a biopsy is characteristic. These plasma cells have a distinct appearance with clock face chromatin and many vacuoles containing IgM antibodies. Alright, that's all we've got. Let's recap. Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia is a plasma cell cancer that overproduces IgM antibodies. High levels of circulating IgM can increase the viscosity of the blood, leading to thrombosis symptoms. The cancerous growth of these plasma cells in the bone marrow can crowd out the normal blood-forming tissue, causing anemia. Peripheral neuropathy is another sign of Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia. Laboratory findings in Waldenstrom macroglobulinemia can include the observation of a M spike on serum protein electrophoresis, as well as the detection of Bence-Jones antibody fragments in the urine. A bone marrow biopsy usually reveals crowding of plasma cells, with over 10% of cells observed being plasma cells. That's enough sightseeing today. Time to get back to work. See you next time.